Hello and welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, and Ken is back in the studio.
What's happening, everybody? Sorry we're a few minutes late. We thought we were live, but no, we
just
weren't.
started talking to ourselves.
And then we're like, oh, we're not live. So anyway, apologize for that.
Well, you've been traveling, though, so you were in Playa del Carmen, Cancun, for your collective event.
Yeah. So we had some incredible speakers. Everybody's talking about a plan B, secondary passports. We're offshore, that kind of stuff. So that was really, really fun. We got James Hickman, the Sovereign Man. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Went over to his house. He's got quite a following, for being a sovereign individual. So it was really neat to learn that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and then you went up to Idaho and you spoke at AJ Green's conference.
AJ Osborne.
AJ Osborne's
yeah, that's
conference.
okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. AJ is a good friend. He has a massive self-storage following. And I spoke at his national conference. There's people from all over the country. My kids came, which was fun. I don't know that they've seen me talk before live.
Right. And they're getting older now, so they're enjoying
Well,
it.
now they want to go as opposed to I was dragging them, So anyway, that was fun. And then my younger son decided to stick around, and he kept going to some of the learning events.
Yeah, which is awesome.
So that was kind of neat. Yeah.
Well, we have a great show today, but just going to do a little housekeeping first. Check out the happy hour tonight for the Inner Circle members. We have Tarl that's going to be on the Inner Circle. You'll see him on Bigger Pockets. They're going to be basically just discussing, the state of the housing market.
Yeah.
So it's Inner Circle, kensinnercircle.com to sign up for $30 a month for our premium membership. But you get things like the happy hour, and you can ask Tarl and Ken questions yourself.
This is a good timely topic. I was talking to Tarl last week about, what's happening in his world, and it's nuts what's going on with mortgage rates and buyers and home builders and flippers. He started in wholesaling, so he's going to have a very interesting. He doesn't have anything to sell, which is what I really like. He's just going to talk about what he's seeing, he does a lot of volume. So if you're in single family, don't miss this one.
Yep, that'll be really, really good. And secondly, we have your book club on Wednesday night at 5. Inner Circle members, make sure to check that out.
That's going to be fun too.
And then for those of you that are not Inner Circle members, I have a webinar next Monday at 5. And I'm bringing on Jorge. He owns a bunch of Airbnbs. If you're looking to get started in Airbnbs, or you have an Airbnb and you're looking to optimize it, he's your guy. He buys Airbnbs, but he also arbitrages them. So he, strikes up deals with landlords to run their Airbnbs. So even if you don't have a lot of money, it's a great way to get started.
Yeah, you can get started in Airbnb for $0.
Exactly, $0.
That's what he teaches. Yeah.
Yep.
Most people, when they start in real estate, they don't have any money. So I think it's a good thing to learn, even if you're not going to do it.
Absolutely. And so that's just kenmcroy.com/webinar to join that. And that one is free and it's open to everybody. And hit the like button, everybody. That really helps us out. All right. That was a lot. We're doing a lot lately.
Yeah, well, the members, this is what the members want.
Yep.
So I think that, it's good. Thank you, by the way. Most of these suggestions are from our subscribers and Inner Circle members, and we're trying to deliver, and it's very exciting.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be chatting about, and why most of you are here, is things you never want to do in a housing bubble. Because we definitely are in a housing bubble, and it's starting to deflate.
Let's start with that first, though. Let's talk about, because I think a lot of people, might dispute that issue. Mm-hmm. Are we in a housing bubble? I think we're in an asset bubble. So the stock market, the housing, there's a lot of things that are inflated right now with these low interest rates that were introduced well over a year ago. And money's cheap. Money became very cheap, and it basically inflated a lot of markets and made people stretch for pricing and that kind of stuff. And now the cost of debt is going up. Cost of equity is going up too. So these are all things that are changing affordability and people are stretching. I read an article this morning that said in many cases mortgages are $1,000 more a month as a result of some of these rate increases. And so times are in a flux. And I was watching some videos over the weekend too, the YouTube stuff. I'm gonna talk about this on my Friday learning video, so I'm not gonna let the cat out of the bag yet. But there are people that are saying, that the collapse in the housing or the slowdown, is creating, all these other issues. And I guess in some cases they are, but I'm going to get very clear on that. I think you have to be, there's no question things are slowing down, guys. Price of money's going up. But the question is, if they've gone from 20%, let's say, rent growth to 10, it's still good. Right. You have to put it all into perspective. But I still believe, first of all, there's going to be lag from the last Federal Reserve's increase. By the way, I was on stage. This was pretty cool. I think it was Friday when the Fed increased the rate. When I got off the stage, somebody showed me that they had done it 0.75 of a point. They have a couple more meetings this year. One in November, I think it is, and the next one after that is in December. And it looks like they're going to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, you keep saying that, Powell's not really hiding his intentions. He wants to increase inflation or increase rates until inflation is under control. So
the reason is you think inflation hurts everyone, every single person, and not everyone is buying houses and not everyone is using debt, but it is if you're high in credit card debt, you could be in a little bit of trouble. I was looking. Some of the credit card rates are, 2-3% higher than they were, and if you have a $10,000 balance, that's a lot.
Absolutely. So a lot of people, so we are seeing, prices correct. We ran into our realtor, Elisa, at the gym, and she was saying, it's like crickets out there as far as buyers go, because first-time home buyers are getting priced out, and then investors are just waiting.
Well, I think, there's a couple things to look at. You have to look at, which markets are investor markets, and I think that you have to put on your investor hat or your call it your home buyer hat, of the people who are not investing, right? And they're very different people. So if and by the way, they're treated the same, of course, based on interest rates. But Phoenix, it was generally an investor market, largely. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is important because their purchasing in Phoenix is subjective, whereas like if you or I were gonna go buy another house, we do it because that's where we live and that's where my kids are, and that's where we want to be. It's very different that if you have a choice. So you might be living in Canada or Seattle or Portland or San Francisco and buying in Phoenix, and so what you have is a lot of investor-driven markets that are really changing. The behavior's changing because the payment has gone up a lot.
Right. And then obviously investors, base their rents on the payment, and then people that are home buyers are just basing it on what they can afford.
Yeah. So what's happening is the inventory is going up, right, which is softening rent growth. So you have rent growth softening, maybe even declining, but declining from what, So, it's still growing, but it's declining from, let's say, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 1 month ago. It's just not as aggressive. But real true rent growth, I built my whole career on 3-4% rent growth. So, these rent growth numbers are nuts. They have been for a while. So you have to keep it all in perspective. But the point is that the mortgage payment growth, I should say, and the rent growth are very disproportionate. They're just not even close.
Absolutely.
So the monthly payment for the debt is growing significantly more than rent, and expenses are growing too. So as an investor, you're looking at these markets and going, I'm going to pass or I'm going to hold off and see what happens. Because prices have gone up, debt's gone up, and rent has gone up, but not even close to those other two.
Right. Exactly. Well, and you always say, in these housing bubbles, don't catch a falling knife, right?
Yeah. So let's explain what that means.
Yeah.
So I've been through a couple corrections, and I do believe we're in a correction. I put a video out last week or 2 weeks ago. It said correction or crash, and it was a very mixed bag on what you guys thought. By the way, thank you. I love it. Now the definition of a crash is 20% loss in value. That's very hard to predict that. We're definitely going through a correction, and all that really means is that things are really, really slowing down, and so you just have to look at the facts. So cash out refinances are down 83% from 1 year ago. That's a lot, and people were using their homes as ATMs. We're at a 22-year low for mortgage applications. Okay, that's huge, right? So all the signs are here, but there's a lag with it all. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of these numbers don't show up immediately. So a federal, when the Federal Reserve met last week, there's a lag. That's not even going to show up until October, November, December.
Well, Renstu was kind of saying that he cited some economists that inflation's actually more under control than we think if you calculate in the new housing prices.
I hope so. Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. You very well could be right. I think that I've been told that in many cases, housing prices is not included in the basket of goods that makes up inflation, but there's a lot of different factors in there.
Yeah.
But I hope he's right. I think that we do need inflation under control. It fixes a lot of stuff.
Right.
But the don't catch a falling knife is, I used that back in years ago, because what happens is there's a progression as things adjust, and it took years to get to this point. Or months, or however you want to measure it from, but it's going to take a while to unwind. So, there's an unraveling. There are people that come to terms with home building or flippers or hard money or loan maturities or rate cap expirations or whatever you want to call it. Those are all decisions people are making right now. Even we're making decisions around loan maturities and rate caps. If you don't know what a rate cap is, it means that when you buy something, you put a cap on it. Well, those caps are being tested right now because, thankfully we bought caps. So it bumps up to the cap. Then there's a maturity on those caps. And for us, it's 3 years. So, so we're we're going, okay, where are rates and where are the caps and what's the cash flow? And so you're looking at all those things. And those are all, people are making a lot of decisions in these back rooms right now.
Yeah.
On existing properties.
Yeah, and so let's go over, what people don't want to do in a housing bubble, right? So there's certain things that people just should not be doing right now. So the first one, that we're going to mention is it's not the right time to flip a house.
But let's talk about why.
Okay.
So the biggest issue, first of all, you have labor costs are up if you're doing a refinance. If you're doing a remodel. And most of these are value add flips. So labor costs are up, supplies are up. I mean, Jesus, I had a compressor go out in my Sub-Zero. That was $1,800 for a motor. Crazy, just for a motor for a refrigerator. Now, and we're seeing it in all our. We have Ross and I. We have close to $70 million in remodels right now in renovations in our company. So that's a lot, $70 million. So we're seeing, so those are up. The cost of hard money if you're doing a flip is up. So prices for homes are actually going down. So now all over the map and different in every market. So, certainly it's, the U.S. is not one big housing market. So you have to look at all those factors. But the old days of buying something with hard money, turning it quick, jamming and, getting contractors in there and turning it really quickly and then selling it to the next person. Just don't forget, the next person has to also get an interest rate and qualify for that home. So, and so that's why we're saying I don't believe now's a good time to flip a house.
Well, there's a lot of flippers, and some of you watching, please comment if you're one of them, are kind of in trouble right now that are sitting on some of these homes because they put a lot of money into it and then rates are really screwing with their sale value.
Yes. So, right. So if you're a flipper and you're sitting on, let's say you have some equity, and I hope you do, but now you have a hard money loan more than likely, or you're paying somebody for above market rate, equity or debt to do that. And you always do that with a short-term thought, right? So there, let's call it less than a year. But now you're forced with declining home prices and rising interest costs for whoever the exit is. So, so those are the things. So now you're sitting there and you might be getting eroded. So your home price might be going down, and the interest rate for your exit or your buyer, it's going up. So affordability is going the wrong way, and home prices are going down. So those are in fact, but we with Tarl, I was talking to him last week. He's going to be on the happy hour tonight. That's exactly he's in the scenario. He's got some that are in this, and I said, listen, we both came into an agreement. You need to get out of those right away. Mm-hmm. Because you got 2 more rate increases. It's going to affect your exit, your buyer, and depending on your hard money deal, all of that stuff is coming to play. It's going to start eating away at your equity. So you don't want to have to write checks. And I think that might be what we're looking at for people that aren't studying, watching the markets. They think last year is going to be the same. It's not.
Invest with Willis says a bunch of flippers owe me money.
Ugh.
So he's the hard money guy.
Wow. I tell you what, thank you for putting that out there. I think that I would like to know more about that because that's actually a big issue is the hard money guys do not want the real estate,
Yeah, they just want their money.
They want their money back,
yeah.
Right? And so it's an interesting time.
So make sure if you're watching, you hit the like button. It really helps us out. It helps get this channel to more people. So the second thing that you don't want to be doing right now is not a good time while we're in, a housing bubble to do floating debt.
Yeah, another really good point. And you want to talk about why?
Yeah. So when you have floating debt, your payments aren't set in stone, right? They can be adjusted. And with all these rate increases, to Ken's point, they're not going to stop anytime soon. So anytime that the interest rates go up, your floating debt payment goes up. So for instance, for me, I locked in all my rates on my floating debt, even though it was a little higher than the rate my floating debt was at, because I saw this coming and I knew.
You look like a genius now.
Yeah. Well,
remember at the time, you're like, I don't know if I should do this. I go, do it.
And at the bank, the lady's like, are you sure you want to do this? You're paying 2% more, da-da-da. Well, now I'm, about 2% behind. So, now it looks good. But, because sometimes when you guys go to the bank, you just assume they know what they're talking about. And they just are looking
I never assumed that, by the way.
They just are looking at, what's in front of them. So, they're kind of like, why would you be doing this? And then now, obviously, it was a good decision. So if you're in floating debt, get out of the floating debt now before these interest rates get jacked too much.
Guys, you could listen. If you're cash flowing now, fix your payment and call it a day. Like, I'm telling you, rates are going to go up. They're going to continue to go up. We still had 8.3% inflation. Now it might adjust again next month or the month after. Hopefully it gets down. But the truth is, even I was reading something my partner Ross sent over this thing from Wells Fargo. It looks to me like 2023 is still going to be higher rates until they get inflation under control. And the Fed has made no bones about it. By the way, their rate increase that they just passed unanimously.
Right.
Voted unanimous. So that is the whole committee just unanimously saying, yes, we need a 3/4. Powell doesn't get to decide this on his own. So, guys, this is what's happening. It's not controversial. The Fed committee is, this is not a controversial subject for them.
Right.
They need to bring inflation down.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of really good comments, on the YouTube chat. And what I would say is, people are saying the markets are going to correct, but every market's a little different. So there's not a standard market, where one market's good. They're all going to do the same thing. They're all going to be very different.
Yeah. And you got to also decide, what does that mean, the correction? For a flipper, it's a big correction. But for a landlord, not necessarily, right? So because remember, residential and multifamily, residential housing for selling to the next person is very different than a long-term renter, cash flow, passive income play. Very different. One's a capital gain strategy, one's a cash flow strategy. So they're gonna those are all gonna be handled very differently.
Yes. So the third thing that you don't want to do right now that we're in a housing bubble is you don't want to get rid of a low interest rate that you already have.
Yeah, it's a valuable thing to have, guys. Just like what Danille was just talking. Can you imagine?
Well, my condo is at 2.66, I think. And I can't, if you're sitting on a piece of property and it's at a 2.6 interest rate or 3% interest rate, and you have to move and you can't afford to just not, have an additional home, I get it. But if you can find any way to keep that property and rent it, because that 2.6, 3% interest rate,
there's some pros and cons. So one is the con is that you can't scoop that equity right now.
Yeah.
You can't do the cash out refi. Well, you can, but your rate's going to be 3 to 4% higher. It's going to double, right? The pro is that your mortgage payment is less. So if there's any softening in the rental market, you have lots of room, right?
Yep.
I can't remember how much you cash flow, but if I remember, it's a lot, almost $1,000 a month, right?
Yeah.
So you have a cushion personally. If rents get hammered, let's say, and I'm wrong about rent growth, you have the ability to lower your rent if you need to, because your payment is fixed. So it's a very important point, and that's why you want as much cash flow as you can. You don't want to be tight. Some of these Airbnb folks are tight. The only way the deal works is if they Airbnb it. So if they put a long-term renter in there, they're negative cash flow, a lot of people. So this is why we always push and advocate for cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. It's really, really important, guys. And this is all going to be tested now in the next 6 months.
Yeah, and that brings us to point number 4, which is now is not the time to buy and hope for appreciation. Which is we've always been telling you guys to not buy and hope for appreciation. But some people, because the market was so crazy, we would get people writing in all the time like, well, I bought this and it doesn't cash flow, but I'm going to sell it in a couple years and I'm going to make some money. And we always said, don't do that. Yeah. And this is why.
Well, hope isn't a strategy. Let's just put it that way. It just, guys, the market fundamentals work when there's more people coming than leaving, and when price of debt is cheap. Okay, so those are big factors. And right now, even on markets that are growing from a migration standpoint, then there are several markets that are still growing, like population wise. Okay, don't forget, real estate exists only if people are there. I shouldn't say it exists. It works if people are there. So if you've ever driven through towns where they're like ghost towns, the reason is, maybe it was a mining town or whatever it was back in the day. Or Detroit is a great example. So, the lot of the jobs left and there's a whole, and even where you're from.
Yeah, Cleveland.
Cleveland and Akron. You go to some of these markets and they have never really recovered. So, you have these beautiful buildings that were there. Real estate only works with people are there. So that's number one. But the second thing is the cost of debt. So the cost of debt is when money's cheap, then consumption's high, right? And
Yep.
it's going up.
Yep, absolutely. And Edward said something interesting. He said, why do people think that interest rates are going to get cut in the next few months to avoid a deep recession? I think they're just hoping.
Yeah, they
once
are.
again.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's really, in my opinion, I haven't seen a good argument for that. So you got to pay attention to who's saying it. So my guess is that it's probably somebody that's selling you something, right?
Right. Or somebody that wants to buy something.
Yeah, or is in the middle of something and they're just not looking at it. They're in a bit of a denial, perhaps, or they read something somewhere, which I always find. I was looking at the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever. They're always like, well, cost is going up. Inflation's up, interest rates are up, and these are all bad, and food's up, fuel's up, cost of cars are up, credit card debt's up, all this stuff's up. But savings rates are up, so you're okay. I was like, well, that's so ridiculous. To think about that, that's how they're spinning it. So be careful, guys. It's still a horrible time. Because even if your savings rate is 2%, if inflation is 8%, you're going backwards -6. So it's just not good, and so be careful of what the media says.
Yeah, and somebody commented on here that the 30-year mortgage right now is 6.8%.
Jeez.
Getting up there.
Hey, by the way, not that I want to be right, but I predicted it was going to be 8 by the end of the year. So, and I got a lot of, this is going to be good. So I predicted 3/4 of a point, 3/4 of a point, and 1/2 a point. Federal funds rate. It's going to be, I can't remember exactly what I said in my video, somewhere between 4 and 5. And we'll see. Yep. And, but just, guys, listen, they're battling inflation. And if you're not paying attention, then you'll see that you'll be wrong.
So the 5th point is right now is not the time to have to sell a house or a property. And I think some of these, new home builders, flippers, people that bought Airbnb, and now that's slowing down, certain people are being put in the position where they have to sell.
I know.
And that's not a great thing right now.
It isn't, but I would do it, guys. Listen, if I mean this, like if you have equity and you're in a situation, it's not your primary home, of course, and you're not cash flowing, you have to, you want to die 1,000 cuts or just make one cut, and call it a day. So, you want to be in a situation where you're harvesting a little bit. If you're thinking that prices are going to go up or interest rates are going to go down, you very well could be wrong. And if you've got equity now, I would take it. I would move on, cut your losses. And by the way, they probably aren't even losses. But even if you do have a little bit of losses, I would take it. I think rates are going up. I think prices are coming down even more. And it's just going to get worse.
Yep. And lastly, now is not the time in a bubble to add value to properties.
Well, right. That's kind of a subjective. There are potentially some things you can do. Yeah. So, one of the things that you got to be careful of is how much money you're spending. If you're doing it to flip a house, I would say you're right.
Yes.
But if you're doing it to increase rent, you can move the needle on rent by upgrading, putting washers and dryers in, and upgrading a unit with better flooring and things like that. You can slowly upgrade your rent over time. Because people will pay for something that's newer. As opposed to something that's older. So, but there's also some debate on that. Going into this kind of a market where you have high inflation, rents are going up. Maybe you keep it. We've talked a lot about this into what we call a classic unit, which means, you don't renovate it. Maybe you just keep the rents lower, and then you take care of, the rent growth or the renovation later. But again, we're a long-term holder. So I can make those decisions. I can buy something today, keep them all classics if they cash flow, and renovate them in 5 or 6 years if the market allows. But so those are all strategies that you can do later. I have properties that I've owned 15 years. I'm on my third renovation,
Right.
And there are times where you just cannot renovation. When we were buying in 08, 9, and 10, there was no such thing as a value add. This might be the end of the value add era. Actually, that's a good idea for a video, Jerry, isn't it? The end of the value add. Okay, guys, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, and I think we have some interesting, comments. So we've heard this before, but I want to address it. Chad is asking, how much do you see rents going down in the worst case scenario? But my question back to Chad was, why will rents go down?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you have to ask yourself is, what would make rents go down? It would have to be a bigger supply of rentals.
That's a very insightful question, Chad. So again, what does rent go down mean? Does that mean that it's going down slower than it's going up? So for me, if your rent's at $1,500 and it goes to $1,400, that means rents go down. But if they went from $1,400 to $1,500 to $1,600, and then instead of going $1,600, they actually go down to $1,550, that just means that they've gone down less. So I think you have to look at that. We're not seeing negative rent growth. What we are seeing is we're seeing less rent growth. So in other words, you have to look at the actual rents, and we haven't penetrated those. So the first thing that happens with rent is concessions are offered. So the very first thing that you need to watch is concessions. So let's say we'll use that same scenario, $1,500 rent. The landlord or the property manager will say, we'll give you $100 off or $200 off or half month off. That's the first thing that happens. So when you start to see concessions in a market, that means that there's more people looking than there are supply. Right. Or so the other way around. The other way, that means you have more supply than there are people looking. And that means the landlord has to actually offer more incentive to try to get the renter. It starts to be competitive for the renter because the renter has lots of choices. So we still have a supply issue, in my opinion, and there are markets that do not have supply issues, like San Francisco, LA, Portland, Seattle, New York, the list goes on, Chicago, and those are big cities. So not every place in those areas are all affected, but you do have people moving away from markets, and you do have people moving in. And if there's a residential issue where people can't buy, it forces more people into rentals or keeps them there. So that's what you have to be mindful of.
And if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button. It really helps us out. We're at 152. Try to get, up to 250. Secondly is don't forget to check out my webinar on Monday. I'm going to be talking to Jorge. It's totally free. He does Airbnb. He buys Airbnbs and also does arbitrage, so you can get started with no money. It's kenmcroy.com/webinar, and it's at 5:00. You can ask Jorge or myself some questions. If you're an Inner Circle member, Ken has a happy hour tonight and a book club on Wednesday. To sign up for that, go to kensinnercircle.com.
Yeah, you guys want to talk to me direct? That's the spot.
Yep, absolutely. So we have a few questions on YouTube that are very interesting. So Dan kind of asked the $1 million question, which is, should I buy now or should I wait?
Yeah.
And this for Dan, it's going to be his primary home. He's worried about where interest rates are going, but also if pricing comes down.
Yeah, it would depend on where. So, if it's your primary home, Dan, I think I would wait. I hate to say that, by the way, because I'm a real estate investor, but I really believe that where you want to take a look at around February or March. You're going to have both rate increases by the end of the year. The election's going to be over, so we'll stop hearing about all the politic nonsense that's going on. All that'll be over. most of the corrections, hopefully, we'll be able to see the new inflation numbers. You're going to want to see what 2022 inflation numbers are in January, and also I think there'll be a settling. So, a lot of this unraveling still needs to come out, and so I don't know what market you're in, but if I were you, I would lock in a rent, and maybe sign a 6-month lease or wherever you are, and just save some cash and wait.
But get pre-qualified and be ready. Be ready to buy. Even on a primary home, he could look at some seller financing deals.
Yeah,
those are really great right now.
There's lots of those. The other thing is there might be some deals from some flippers and some home builders that they're bumping against some negative. So you might be able to cut some deals there. And to your point, though, if you could step into something. I do think rates are going up, so that potentially is an issue. But I do believe once we get inflation under control, I think that's going to be well into next year. Then you'll start to see rates come down again because they got to kickstart the economy again. So we're going to go through this adjustment. So it's a very good time for you to sit back and watch and let the real estate fall a bit as a result of the cost of debt going up. And then get yourself in a cash position, and then when rates start to come back again, that's a good time to strike.
Yep. And Jay Sanchez asked on YouTube, he said, well, should I buy a rental that breaks even? Because he's feeling the pressure to do that. And he said that he feels like he needs to just pull the trigger.
I think you just need to keep looking. I'm not a break even, Jay. I don't think it's worth it.
It's never break even. Yeah. If you think it's break even, you're negative.
Yeah. That's what guys say when they get back from Vegas. How'd you do? I broke even. Well, I just believe that, you should be cash flowing, because like in Danille's scenario is a great one. Like, I know you've got some that are $700, $800, $900 a month in cash flow.
Right. So
you have a lot of room there, to, with rents going down, or you have your interest rates fixed, so that's good. I just don't think.
Well, for instance, I had to fix my air conditioner in my one unit 4 times this summer. 4 times. And it's so frustrating. It's not an old unit, but to my point of you're not really going to break even. I mean, every time was between, $150 and $400, right? So you start adding up these things that happen. And if you're breaking even, you're coming out of pocket for that stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah. Just be careful. And I saw you were from Los Angeles as well. And there's all kinds of other things going on there. First of all, there's a lot of people, negatively talking about California. We love it. We spend the summer there.
Yeah, we like to go there. We don't like to buy real estate there.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just don't think you should be buying break-even deals ever. I don't think it's a good strategy.
Yep, agreed. Because once again, now you're not getting the appreciation, right? So you could get it going down, and then you don't have cash flow.
Right.
So Sally from the Inner Circle. So we're going to jump into the Inner Circle questions. kensinnercircle.com to sign up. $30 a month. You can ask Ken questions, do happy hours, book clubs, etc. So Sally wants to know, I'm interested in understanding seller finance structure. So if she wanted to find somebody that has seller finance, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of podcasts on this, and we've done a bunch of videos on this. It's actually quite simple. So basically the seller carries the note. That's it. So
it's a great deal if you guys are getting started with no money.
So
if you want to find a really cheap interest rate around there.
Yeah. And so, you negotiate, everything's negotiable with seller financing. The rate, how much you put down, if you put any down. There's so many things that you can do. I have a friend that started a business. There was one vacant commercial space, and he wanted to start a gym, and the gym owner, because he wanted it full, gave him the unit free and helped buy all his equipment, and started a gym business. So that's all it is. It's a negotiation with the seller that is trying to move inventory, and it has some kind of payment on it. So there's a lot of scenarios on this. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on negotiation and terms and all that kind of stuff. But there's quite a bit of really good information that we've done on this show. That and also put it out there on the internet. Say, hey, I'm looking at seller financing. Any great ideas? You'll be very surprised. You might even want to do it here. You get some very good feedback, and there's no deal's the same.
Exactly. It's a great option. If you can find seller, notes to carry right now, it could be a very good thing for you.
And I think you can, but don't catch a falling knife, right? Like, are you taking somebody's position? That might go down.
And make sure that deal is papered up by your attorney. So Jeff from the Inner Circle, he owns a condo in Laughlin, Nevada. Fabulous renter, but she's maxed out as far as she can afford on rent. He could charge her another $200 in rent. Would you recommend I leave her in the condo and pull 65% of the equity out and move that into another property, or sell the property and do a 1031 exchange into a property that has a higher cash flow? His cap right now is 5.7.
What's he cash flowing?
He didn't say.
Okay.
He said his cap rate is 5.7.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a lot going on there. So the first of all, if you have a good tenant that's in place and you can only rent them, or you have a $200 increase, I would keep that tenant. We talk a lot about this. They're gold. Like, good tenants paying on time that are not pains in your ass are gold. So, I would just personally, I would lock that person in if they're great, and give them a little bit of a break, because really, is $200 a month really going to change your life? If you're really
tight
cash flowing and it's tight, different issue. So if you're really tight and you're not cash flowing, or you're breaking even, I guess, then you're probably better off to move the money. But the problem is what are you going to move it to? Rates are a lot higher, prices are a lot higher. Are you really going to get that much better of a deal right now? I don't think so, and you may not. And the cash out refis are, you're also, there's a cost for that. So, there's a bunch of scenarios here. I wish I had more information here. I don't know. When you say 65%, what's your rate going to be? What's your payment going to be? What's the renter going to pay? What are your operating expenses? Do you cash flow? Do you not cash flow? So all those things come into play. But if you have a lock and load deal where you got a tenant in there that's covering all your stuff, I would wait for a while.
Yep, absolutely. The grass isn't always greener. Laura from the Inner Circle, she said, I just finished your closing your first deal lesson and I'm ready to get started. Do you have any investor conferences coming up? Limitless happened before I had this epiphany to start investing in real estate.
Yeah, I don't.
We have Limitless next year?
Well, yeah, we have Limitless in June,
yeah.
15th through the 17th. I'm sorry, I thought that she was talking about something, right away.
Oh, okay.
I don't have anything. I just do the one conference a year, and but there's plenty of really good people to follow. Tarl Yarber, Pace Morby, David Green, Bigger Pockets. These are all friends. They'll all be at the conference, but they might have some stuff that you can watch. I think there's a lot of really good people out there that are doing stuff. Be careful. Thank you for going through the program and but again, things have really changed from the time we did that program. Rates are up, prices are up, and we could see some stagnant rent growth. So be careful.
Yeah, and definitely check out Limitless 2023, as we're going to have people on there talking about all of that. Yep. And it will be very different even then. Amelia had a good question. I was talking to a realtor here in Tucson who told me that developers are starting to get desperate because people aren't buying. He said they're coming to him for deals.
Yeah.
But builders and flippers, guys. They're, they're sitting on a lot of inventory. That happened to you in the 2008 when you were flipping condos.
Yeah. No, 100%. I'll tell you the story. We did several thousand condos. When things changed, they change quick. We were sitting on on one project, we had 440 units. We had 60 to 70 units left. Luckily, everybody was paid. The bank was paid. We used Lehman Brothers, and I can't remember who our first was, but Lehman was our second, and mezzanine financing or hard money or whatever you want to call it. Everyone was paid, so that was our inventory. We had like $12 million. It was supposed to be all profit, and we ended up. It was way less than half of that. When the things stop. So, again. Don't catch a falling knife. The thing about builders is that they have a cost. If they might be into the house, let's say a 2,000 square foot house, they might be at around $300,000 cost in that house. So, you just got to be careful. I think, and I think it's a little too soon too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel from the Inner Circle, he just bought a building. He's upgrading a couple units and he's creating 2 more units. So he's asking, should he be focused on the number of months until I'm paid back for my investment with the higher rents? Or should I focus on viewing those reno costs in light of what I could potentially refinance for in 2 to 3 years after rents stabilize?
Yeah, I think right now you should be solving the cash flow. Nobody knows what the market's going to be like in 2 or 3 years. Rates could be higher, and prices could be a lot less. So you can't base the future based on what we just went through, and so I think what you want to do is you want to solve the cash flow now. Make sure everything you have is covered financially. You want your debt covered. You want your expenses covered. You want a good renter in there, and then ride this out. That's what you want to do.
So George has a good question on YouTube. He said, what are the motivations for a seller to finance? And that's a great question. So why would a seller finance you a deal versus just selling?
Well, a flipper, the gentleman was saying the flippers owe him a lot of money. Mm-hmm. You got to think of the motivation of the seller, right? And so maybe they have a bunch of trapped equity in their home. And it's a great way. I know people do it for tax reasons. Mm-hmm. So, they can, let's say they're retiring and they have, a bunch of equity in there and they don't want a capital gain. So, they can piece it out over time. Maybe you have a builder that has a property that's sitting vacant and they have a credit line on a construction loan. There's a bunch of scenarios where there's a motivation by sellers. I think I understand the question. It's, the traditional, I have no motivation to sell my home right now. So I get that. That's where most people are. So, but there's a lot of people that are in very different scenarios. They've renovated something, they've flipped something, they're in a hard money deal. And maybe they have bad credit, and they've gotten an above rate market, and it's the loan's maturing. There's a zillion things that sellers are trying to get out from under.
Yeah, and also, it's really in the seller's interest. Like if you stop paying them, they get to keep all their money and keep the property.
Let's don't forget about that.
It's
seller financing means if you default, they get the house back. So it's a great way for them to get some cash flow. You get into a house. Just like it would on a lender. If you can't pay your, this is what happened in 08, 9, 10. You can't pay your mortgage. It goes back to the bank. Well, instead of the bank, it goes back to the seller. So,
right, exactly. And a lot of times you need to teach people about seller financing because your average Joe person wanting to sell their house doesn't even know about it. So, you have to find these deals, educate the sellers, and, work out something. Sunil that we had on our podcast a few weeks ago, he does a lot of seller financing deals and he just goes around and educates a lot of times these more older people about why it's beneficial for them. And it takes a little bit of convincing, but it is. They, a lot of times they eventually sign up for it.
Well, he approaches it from the tax angle, which I think is a pretty smart idea. Mm-hmm. They still own the house and they get these reoccurring monthly payments.
Yep.
Over a long period.
Absolutely. So Eric has a good question on Inner Circle. He said, I plan on doing a 1031 exchange to sell a condo and buy either another condo, a single family, or a multifamily in a better market closer to where I live. I have contacted the 1031 exchange experts. Do you have any advice or lessons you have learned you can share about doing a 1031 exchange?
That's a really good question. I've learned a lot. The biggest problem that you have is if you're in escrow and you now have a gun to your head on finding a replacement property. And I'm going off of memory, but I think you have to identify in the first 90 days and then you have to close in 6 months, or it's pretty close to that. So what that means is, let's say you're in escrow, and by the way, you can't touch the money. So the money goes into an exchange account, and if you pull any out, it's taxable. The property itself that you buy has to be more than the one that you're coming out of. So let's say you're at $500,000 on the one you sell. The one that you're going into has to be more than that. Otherwise, it's considered what's called boot, which means let's say you 1031 into something that's $400,000. That means you have a $100,000 issue. They call that boot. That's taxable. So there's all these things. But the biggest thing from my standpoint are the people that get stuck in an exchange account financially. So, and then they're scrambling to try to find another deal. So what they do is they let the tax drive the deal. They're trying to save tax. So whenever a broker calls me, and it's funny because brokers think that they have this big advantage. Broker calls me up and says, I got somebody that has 10 million or 20 million, let's say, in a tax deferred. They're in a 1031 and they're looking for a replacement property. Will you sell? I know I got them because they have a time window. I don't. So what happens a lot of time is sophisticated sellers might even jack that number up even more, because now the seller has a tremendous advantage to somebody who's stuck in an exchange account. So the right thing to do is to identify the replacement property before you go into escrow, and that's what you want. So you want to have that replacement property identified, and then go into escrow and have them all kind of happen at the same time. So you can just close, roll that money into the new one, and you don't want to be caught in the middle.
Yeah, because then you're scrambling just to buy whatever you can possibly buy, good deal or not, just to avoid tax.
Yeah.
All right. So Megan has a good question, and somebody on YouTube had a similar question. She said, how do I find a mentor in real estate?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think that they're everywhere, and I don't know where you live, but the best thing, you can go into these real estate clubs. You can find, you can look at transactions. You can find acts from property managers, from real estate agents. It's really as simple as just buying somebody a cup of coffee and say, "Can I meet with you once or twice a month?" That's what I did. And you don't realize the wisdom. Sometimes they don't even realize that they're teachers. All you really want to do is shortcut a lot of problems. So you want to find the real teachers are people that have really done stuff. That's one of the big issues I have with the school system. In a lot of ways, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole too far, but sometimes I go on even YouTube and I see these young kids, trying to talk about real estate. They haven't been, they really don't have a lot of experience of trying to sell you trinkets, books and products and all that shit. Be careful who your teachers are. But always just remember, if you want to buy real estate, go surround yourself with people that are doing it, own it, and they understand the tax issues, the property management issues. They bought a bunch of them and they've made mistakes. That's who you want to learn from. And it's actually quite simple, and it doesn't really cost you anything. You just have to find them. I wish there was a database, but there isn't. But just continue to ask this question to everybody that that's actually doing deals. And I guarantee you'll find somebody that will meet with you. For me, I met once to twice a month for 10 years, and I learned a lot.
Absolutely. And somebody asked, who your mentor is.
Well, it's you.
Oh, thanks.
No, I'm joking.
It's not.
No, I've had a bunch over the years. So believe it or not, I've had mentors and coaches for almost everything. For book writing, obviously, I would say Kiyosaki in a lot of ways was one of mine. A guy by the name of Charlie Dunlap, and
you've had different mentors at different,
different stages.
Different stages, right? Because, you get to a certain point and then, or you veer a certain way and then you need a new mentor. You need a different mentor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had mentors in property management. I've had mentors in acquisitions. I've had mentors for book writing. I've had mentors. I have I've climbed, took my kids to Kilimanjaro twice, climbed that. I had a coach and a mentor for that, Kevin Trillo, who climbed Mount Everest. So I just find people that are remarkable in, whatever it is that they're doing. We have trainers. I have the same thing. Like I need that, I need somebody to kick my butt that is a good trainer. So I at any given time, I probably have a half a dozen. I come from a school of thought that, that people that are really, really good at things there's a reason. And so I just want to learn from them.
So Christian said, honestly, Ken, you were my invisible mentor. I got where I was because of you.
Thank you.
But I think it's important, there's tons of ways you can learn, podcasts, YouTube, reaching out to some of the people, that you hear on these kind of shows because they might be your mentor. So anyways, we are going to wrap it up. Make sure you check out the webinar next Monday, kenmcelroy.com/webinar. That's with Jorge and Airbnbs. Totally free. He can show you how to get started with no money or by buying your own Airbnb. And then tonight we have kensinnercircle.com, the happy hour with Taro Yarber from Bigger Pockets, going to be discussing the single family market. So go to kensinnercircle.com to check that out and to sign up and hit that like button because it helps us out.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
See you guys next week.
As always, great chatting with y'all.